This is a story that came out today, um, December 31st, 2017. And some of you might have heard this by now. Gunmen ambushed deputies in deadly Douglas County shooting. And this was in Colorado. And I will leave the link to this story in the description box from the Denver Post. So this seems to be a pretty deadly ambush. The gunman who killed one Douglas County deputy and wounded four others ambushed the law enforcement officers as they responded to a domestic disturbance call at the Highland Ranch apartment complex. Sheriff Tony Spurlock said Sunday. He knew we were coming, Spurlock said. He said the gunman used a rifle and fired at least 100 rounds. Wow. You know what? Anytime somebody fires that amount of rounds, just like your Stephen Paddock, they intend to kill. That is an intentional killing right there. He was killed in a shootout with law enforcement officers. Four deputies arrived at the gunman's home in the Cooper Canyon apartment at the same time. They were immediately shot and they called for backup. All were wearing bulletproof vests, but were struck in unprotected parts of their bodies. They all went down almost within seconds of each other, Spurlock said at a news conference. The wounded deputies crawled away while others responded. Deputy Zachary Parrish, 29, was identified as the slain deputy, and Spurlock said the deputy had been shot several times. Um, so the one officer that died was 29 years old. Okay, when Parrish was shot and went down, the other officers went down right around him, Spurlock said. They tried to pull him out, but were unable due to their injuries. I do know all of them were shot very, very quickly, and they all went down almost within seconds of each other. So this sounds like it was a planned ambush. You know, the call came to law enforcement, they showed up, and if they were immediately shot, then this sounds like a setup. He knew they were coming. We obviously let him know we were there to investigate the disturbance. Spurlock said Parrish is survived by a wife and two young children. He had been a deputy for about 7 months, so he was pretty new on the job. They had many hopes and dreams that he was doing his job and he was doing whatever. I'm skipping over that. The injured deputies were Mike Doyle, 28, Taylor Davis, 30, Jeffrey Pell, 32, Castle Rock police officer Tom O'Donnell, 41. Okay, so those were the ones that were injured. And they are listed as stable in the hospital. Okay. Two other people in adjacent apartments were also wounded, but their injuries were not life-threatening, Spurlock said. Our hearts and prayers go out to them, as well as just regular people trying to live their lives disrupted by this individual, Spurlock said. Spurlock said the gunman had no known criminal history, but he was known to law enforcement. He declined to provide further details, and the gunman name will not be released until positive identification by the coroner. You know what? He's probably one of those people that had run ins with the law, but they kept his record clean. Because they'll do that for each other. They won't do that for black people, but for each other, they definitely will do that. Parrish's body was moved from Littleton Adventist Hospital in the black hearse. Okay, so he was placed in a black hearse. Well, I guess so. He was dead, accompanied by dozens of law enforcement vehicles, motorcycles, as it drove south on Broadway towards C-470. Firefighters stood saluting on their trucks along with the procession route, and some residents stood on the street corners with American flags. Well, I can tell that wasn't the hood. Boulder County Sheriff Joe Pell's son, Jeff, was among the wounded deputies, according to the sheriff's Facebook page. Later on Sunday afternoon, investigators researched two vehicles, a Ford Mustang LX and a four-door maroon Chevrolet sedan. The plate on the Mustang said veteran of Iraq War. Spurlock said officers had been called to the apartment in the block of 3400 of County Line Road near Colorado Boulevard at 1:30 a.m. on a noise complaint. But upon arrival, they found no evidence of any issues and left. A subsequent call initially was believed to be a domestic dispute, but when four deputies arrived at 5:14 a.m., it became clear that this was more generic disturbance phoned in by a neighbor. The suspect was just making a ton of noise and annoying everyone around him, Spurlock said. The deputies were let into the apartment by one of the two men who were roommates. The deputies were having a conversation with the two men when the suspect decided to barricade himself in a bedroom and soon after opened fire with a burst that killed Parrish and wounded the other officer, Spurlock said. The roommate was not injured and has been cooperating with investigators, he said. Spurlock said that investigators would be examining officers' body cameras to piece together details of the incident, with Douglas County detective working around the clock along with Arapahoe County and the 18th Judicial District. This is going to be a several-day investigation, as you can imagine, Spurlock said. So I asked the community to have patience with us. The sheriff noted that he didn't know if the deputies arriving at the call had any specific knowledge about the possibility of guns at this residence. They always know it's a strong possibility. We respond to every call anticipating that everyone has a gun, Spurlock said. This is Colorado. Everybody has a gun. We anticipate that when we respond to them, that people have guns, and we address that in that fashion. He added that once a suspect barricades himself, you can almost always assume there's a gun there. The situation went very quickly once the officers could no longer negotiate with him. Stephen Silknitter, 50, lives in the Cooper Canyon apartment complex, but was working elsewhere overnight when he heard about the shooting from his son. He called home, waking up his fiancée, Vera Cover. A few minutes, Cover said she heard about 20 shots in rapid succession. It was surreal, said Cover, 50. She had been listening to the news and was aware that the authorities were warning residents to stay inside and avoid windows and exterior walls. My cats were scared, so I took them and cuddled up on the sofa. Cover joined Silknitter, who has been living in the complex for 4 years. About 1 year ago, it is normally quiet and beautiful, she said. The shooting was coming from a building about 50 yards from the apartment where she and Silknitter lived. I walk by that building all the time and I just feel safe here. Silknitter arrived at the scene and he said he heard 15 to 20 shots from about a quarter mile away. It was back and forth, unbelievable, said Silknitter, who lived in Aurora during the 2012 Aurora theater shooting. Well, I guess everywhere this man goes, there's some shooting, right? Where do you move to? He said, shaking his head. All right. 3 of the wounded were taken to Sky Ridge Medical Center in Lone Tree with non-critical injuries, said Linda Watson, a hospital spokesman. An additional 4 were taken to Littleton Adventist Hospital, said Alyssa Parker, a hospital spokesman. Because of the size of the investigation, an emergency shelter was set up at East Ridge Recreation Center, 9568 University Boulevard in Highland Ranch. Anyone who has been displaced can go there, the sheriff department said. While the incident unfolded, the nearby recreation center prepared to receive people displaced by the activity. Susan Drum, a 58-year-old dog groomer. It sounds like everybody in this apartment was in their 50s, doesn't it? I wonder if it's one of those senior kind of apartment places, because it seems like everybody in the article is in their 50s that live there. Susan Drum, a 58-year-old dog groomer, was the first displaced resident from the complex to show up at the rec center. She said she lives about 2 buildings away from the shooting site in the same complex. She was awakened shortly before 6 a.m. by her dog's barking and sounds she initially believed was a car backfiring 7 or 8 times. Since her apartment abuts since her apartment abuts C 470, she thought it might be heavy equipment from construction activity. She calmed her dogs and went back to sleep around 7:45 a.m. when a police officer knocked on her door and informed her that there had been a shooting in the complex. They didn't communicate how serious the situation was, she said. Drum said she was given no instructions to stay inside and assumed it was okay to head to the grocery store for some milk for breakfast. When she tried to return home, the area had been locked down. All right. So, some woman that lives with dogs. Okay. All right. That's when she headed to the rec center, where workers helped her arrange to get back into her apartment. Drum said she had lived at the apartment for more than a year and described a mix of a lot of people, families, ethnicities. I've never felt uncomfortable. Everyone's pretty quiet. I feel really safe, she said, but at the same time, I'm not surprised. Violence is becoming more and more prevalent. No, it is. It's a way of life in America. Law enforcement, fire and rescue vehicles came and went throughout the morning. Most of the county line roads was closed down from Colorado Boulevard to University Boulevard. C 470 was closed from Quebec Street to University Boulevard. My heart breaks for all those affected by the terrible tragedy in Douglas County. U.S. Senator Cory Gardner, a Republican from Colorado, said in a statement, "Our hearts go out to the families of the deputy who was fatally wounded. Our law enforcement officers skipping." All right. And here's some tweets right here, ladies and gentlemen. Just people sending in their condolences and things of that nature. So I guess that's a map of the area where the shooting took place. You know, this whole situation seems strange. I wouldn't be surprised if the guy that picked up the gun was all strung out on drugs. I wouldn't be surprised. That seems to be the norm in America. Please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And don't forget to hit on the notification bell. That way you don't miss my upcoming videos. And also, please join me on Black Junction TV and blackspot.com. I see that some of you have joined me over there, but not everybody. And I would love to encourage everybody, especially to go to Black Junction TV. It's absolutely free to sign up and have your own channel out there. So please consider it, because eventually the Black YouTubers, many of us, are going to be migrating over there, and setting up shop over there permanently. So please join us over there. The more that go over there, and and keeping the activity going over on that social media site, the better. The better. And please get your voice out there. If you're interested in doing videos, that's the perfect place to do it. Really, you'll be in front of an audience that's just like yourself on Black social media. Peace, family.